It was February the 17th, 1945. Daniels confesses hammer slaying. Train crew finds body of Collins. Found it in a caboose 20 miles from the scene of Martin. Murder, slayer, kin of victim was the headlines in the Floyd County Times. A slayer's conscience and the strangling grip of circumstances resulted here Tuesday in a confession which dispelled the mystery in the hammer slaying of Dan Collins, 52, veteran Martin trainman, whose battered body was found in the caboose of a coal train at Wheelwright Junction shortly before 4 a.m. last Saturday. 22-year-old Graydon Daniel, husband of the victim's stepdaughter and also a resident of Martin and a trainman, made a complete confession of the murder shortly after he had been taken from the county jail to a jury room on the second floor of the courthouse at 11 o'clock Tuesday morning for questioning. He asked to speak privately with Detective Arch Thompson of the Kentucky State Police, who had cultivated his friendship, talked a few minutes. Then Thompson called County Attorney W. W. Burchett, a stenographer, and officers for the official confession. That done, Daniel said, I had to tell it. It was killing me. Asked by County Attorney Burchett on the conclusion of questioning how he then felt, Daniels replied, I feel fine. Collins, the confession indicated, was killed before the train cleared Martin, possibly in the vicinity of the railroad bridge, which runs midway between the Collins and Daniels homes. The murder was not discovered, however, until the train had reached Wheelwright, after the caboose in which the body was found had remained at Wheelwright Junction, while the other section of the train had been taken onto Wheelwright for the placing of empty coal cars. When Taylor Begley, conductor of the train, returned with other employees from Wheelwright to the junction, he went to the caboose and, peering inside, saw Collins's body on the floor. He and others entered to find the interior a shamble, the walls blood-spattered, a pool of blood on the floor, and the train veteran's head battered by 7 blows from a ball-peen hammer, which was found near the body. Okay, page 6. Okay, page 6 says, in his confession, Daniels established the claim of self-defense. He said he boarded the caboose near the railway depot at Martin to ride to a point near his home in the Braley Camp addition to Martin. And the Braley Camp addition is a residential area located in Martin, Kentucky. Historically, it was recognized as a housing development or camp neighborhood within the city limits. Local records mention residents using it as a landmark for homes near the railway depot in Martin. The term camp in this region often refers to former coal camp housing. When he entered, he said Collins was firing the stove. A quarrel followed, with Collins ordering him out and shoving him against the door of the caboose, he claimed. When Collins struck at him with the hammer, he continued, he struck the other with his fist, and the elder man then threw the hammer at him. Daniels recovered the hammer and struck the other. Okay, I don't make any sense out of that, but that's what the newspaper says. Asked how many times he struck Collins, he said he did not know. Coroner Brady Shepard, who arrived at Wheelwright Junction at 5:45 a.m., said Collins had been dead from 4 to 6 hours. This estimate was corroborated by Daniels' confession, which placed the killing at around midnight. Collins lay on his back, his gloves still on. He had, officers said, been dragged a distance of approximately 5 feet. The fire in the stove had died out. Every C&O agent, which is the coal railroad here in Kentucky, in this section, was immediately placed on the case, working with Detectives Thompson and members of the Sheriff's Office, Sheriff Troy B. Sturgill. The mystery became apparently more profound when it became known that no other member of the train crew had been in the caboose or had seen Collins, its only occupant, since departure from the Martin Yards. The train had made 3 stops en route, and officers were confronted with covering the 20-mile distance from Martin to Wheelwright in search of the slayer. But there were those in the home of the 2 men who suspected Daniels. There was talk of previous trouble between the 2. Daniels was watched while the body of the victim lay in the Collinses' home. Daniels, who is said to have stopped calling on Collins some time ago, or stopped speaking to him, stayed at the Collinses' residence while the body was kept there against the day of burial. He and another man took the hammer found in the caboose to the state police headquarters at Pikeville. He attended the funeral of Collins, was said to have even helped dig the victim's grave. 2 hours after the victim had been buried, officers called at the Collinses' home where Daniels and other members of the family were eating supper. Deputy Sheriff Harold Kahn and Detective Thompson asked him the whereabouts of the clothing he wore on the night Collins was killed, and he quickly agreed to go to his home with them and get these. "I'll tell you," he later said, "they're blood on 'em, but it's chicken blood." He explained he had killed a chicken 2 weeks earlier in daylight, yet his lantern was blood-stained. Later, before being jailed here, he told County Attorney Burchett he might have something to tell next day. Officers pointed out to him that the stains on his clothing would be checked against Collins's blood, looking for his blood type, since there was no DNA study back then. And so wound up the trail of circumstances leading up to the confession. Even with Daniel's confession at hand, authorities still submitted his clothing, fingerprints, and other exhibits to the FBI for analysis and comparison. Working with Sheriff Sturgill and deputies Harold Kahn, Tom G. Dingus, W. L. Rice, Ep. Lafferty, were Detectives Thompson, C&O agents of the railroad, M. L. Markham, G. L. Gray, W. H. and Charles Potter, G. E. Smith, and J. F. Broke, Jr. Collins a native of the Left Beaver Creek section, had been employed by the C&O Railway Company 29 years, beginning work with the opening of the Long Fork branch between Martin and Weeksbury. He had been promoted to the post of conductor, but was working as a brakeman on the night of his death, a senior employee having returned to work the same run. He was the son of W. R. Scott Collins and Frances Collins. Mr. Collins was a member of the Christian Church and was a veteran of World War I. Surviving are his widows, Miss Gypsy Compton Collins, 2 sons, 3 daughters, and 2 half-brothers survive. The funeral from Martin High School Auditorium. So the funeral was held at the Martin High School Auditorium, which is in town Martin, was conducted by the Reverend S. C. Honeycutt and Julian Hunt, and burial was made in the Martin Cemetery under the direction of the Rind Funeral Home. The burial was under the auspices of the American Legion Post at Martin. February 24th, 1949. The judge holds Daniels here without bond. Counsel for slayer may take bail plea in the circuit court. Joe P. Tackett, attorney for Graydon Daniels, 22-year-old, confessed hammer slayer of 52-year-old Dan Collins, whose body was found in a coal train caboose at Wheelwright Junction in the early morning hours of February the 12th. Indicated Tuesday he may appeal to the Floyd Circuit Court for bond for his client. The Prestonburg attorney hinted as much after Judge Alex L. Davidson concluded the examining trial here Tuesday afternoon of Daniels with a quick "no bond allowed," seconds after opposing counsel had said they had finished with testimony. Daniels himself did not testify at the hearing. Only his father and the Reverend Edgar R. Miller of Oxshire appeared as witnesses in his behalf, and they told of a dent in the wall of the caboose. This is to substantiate the claim of the slayer, which is Dan Collins' slayer, that Collins threw the hammer at Daniels before the implement, which was the hammer, was turned on him with devastating fury. So they're claiming that Dan Collins was coming at him with the hammer, and he decided to take it and beat him with it. Cross-questioning by attorney Edward L. Allen elicited from Miller the admission that the dent was between the stove and the back door of the caboose, not toward the front door, which Daniels claimed he had been shoved by Collins. Detective Arch Thompson of the State Police corroborated for the Commonwealth the details of Daniels' confession and declared it was gained without threats or promises. And M.T. Begley of Martin, conductor of the train of which Collins was a crew member on the night of the slaying, told of finding Collins's body when he opened the caboose door after returning to that section. Begley said the body apparently had been dragged a distance of 4.5 feet. Asked if the train was brought to such a sharp stop or starts so suddenly as to move the body, he expressed the opinion it had not been. He pointed out that a lunch pail had remained upright on a couch in the caboose, adding that if jerks of the train had been sufficient enough to move the body, the pail and the cushions would have been in the floor. Begley admitted under cross-examination that Collins had previously had rackets with other railway employees. In other words, he had trouble with them. Apparently seeking to establish robbery as a motive for the slaying, the Commonwealth asked Miss Gypsy Collins, widow of the slain man, how much money he carried on the night of his death. She said he usually carried with him a comparatively large amount of cash, but that on leaving home the evening of his death, he left with her $330 all in cash. She described the financial circumstances of Daniels, whose wife is the daughter of Miss Collins by a previous marriage, saying he had to be notified by a bank here to pay $150 on a $300 note, that he had borrowed $50 from Steve Hamilton and was indebted to Duran Moore, a Martin merchant, in the sum of $25. So she said he was in financial trouble. Of Daniel's actions and conversation following news of the murder, she pointed out, number one, I mentioned that they said whoever killed Dan had tried to drag him off the train. Graydon says, looks like there was too much evidence. Number two, Daniels was at her home when her two sons and her brother and Deputy Sheriff Scott Compton brought the death hammer there, and Daniels accompanied Compton to Pikeville to deliver the hammer, to the state police for fingerprint examination. Number three, Daniels showed visitors to the Collins home where the corpse lay, and showing the marks on the victim's head. Number four, when she said she did not want to see her husband's clothing until they had been cleaned of bloodstains, Daniel said he would take them to his home and clean them. She had also said she was told he washed the blood from her husband's spectacles, glasses in other words, after she had seen them, and had expressed regret she had looked on them while they were yet bloody. Asked by the defense if she knew of her husband having a fight during the day preceding his death, she said she did not, adding he stayed at home. She also denied knowing of any trouble between Collins and Daniels. W. H. Potter, CNO detective, described the wounds of Collins as a blow on the right side of his head at the tip of the ear, two on the left side of the head, one above the eye, one in the center of the forehead, and the sixth in the top of his head. All except this last blow, he said, resulted in skull fractures. March 31st, 1949, the Floyd County Times. Court plans continuance of 13 cases. But the murder case, in which an indictment is expected, or early indictment, is that of Graydon Daniels, accused of slaying of Dan Collins, railway employee. April 14th, 1949. Two murder indictments were among the 41 true bills reported by the grand jury here as of Wednesday morning, and both men named in the indictments. One of them was Graydon Daniels. Daniels, who is accused of the hammer murder of Dan Collins, veteran CNO railway employee, was denied bond by Circuit Judge Edward P. Hill Wednesday morning. The prisoner applied for bail Monday, and both the Commonwealth and defense had submitted to Judge Hill in support of their claims the evidence produced at the examining trial here of Daniels, at the end of which County Judge Davidson denied him bail. April 21st, 1949. Judge orders rail caboose brought here in Monday murder case. The railway caboose in which the battered body of Dan Collins was found at Wheelwright Junction a few weeks ago has been ordered by Circuit Judge E.P. Hill to be returned to the West Prestonsburg siding for the trial of Graydon Daniels, who is the alleged slayer of Collins, here next week. The trial is slated to begin Monday, and the caboose has been ordered here by that time for examination by attorneys and witnesses. The trial will probably highlight an otherwise desultory court term. In other words, no fixed plan. May 5th, 1949. Murder jury is deadlocked. Bond granted defendant who confessed to slaying his step-father-in-law. Graydon Daniels, confessed slayer of his step-father-in-law Dan Collins, was released under $15,000 bond after a jury in circuit court here last Friday afternoon reported to Circuit Judge Edward P. Hill less than 2 hours after it had begun its deliberations that it was hopelessly disagreed. He executed bond with Lee B. Hall, F. A. Hopkins, A. J. Gearhart, J. M. Daniel as his bondsman. Twice earlier, following hearings before County Judge Alex L. Davidson and Circuit Judge Hill, he had been denied bail. The jury, widely at variance, was reported via the grapevine as polling 2 members for acquittal to 2 years, with others voting for sentences ranging from 7 years to death or life imprisonment. Daniels, who had admitted beating Collins to death with the hammer in the caboose of a coal train as it left Martin, where both men lived, contended he did so because he was attacked by Collins and was in danger of his life. Prior to his confession, he claimed blood found on his clothing was from a chicken he had killed a few days earlier, but FBI analysis disclosed the stains are from human blood and the same blood type as that from Collins's body. This was before DNA. As also from the death hammer, same blood type. The trial, one of the most sensational in years, virtually ended the April criminal term. The May civil term, which began Monday, will see the trial of some criminal cases. February 2nd, 1950. A Pike County jury, which had qualified as capable of inflicting the death penalty, held Graydon Daniels guilty here last Friday night of the hammer slaying of his stepfather-in-law Dan Collins, and fixed his sentence at 21 years. Daniels, whose trial began on the preceding Monday with the long drawn-out qualifying of a jury under the death penalty, received the verdict without visible show of emotion. At his preceding trial with a Floyd County jury hearing the case, the jurors could not agree. They were deadlocked. The jury of Pike Countyans deliberated about 30 minutes. Daniels testified he struck the 55-year-old Collins in self-defense. He testified he entered the caboose of the coal train on which Collins was a brakeman, with the intention of riding to a point near his home in Martin, that Collins ordered him off and threw a hammer at him. He claimed he did not strike Collins till the latter armed himself with a brake stick, throwing the hammer, and was threatening him. The Commonwealth presented testimony, however, to the effect that all brake sticks in the caboose were in place when Collins's body was found after the train had stopped at Wheelwright Junction, 25 miles away from the train from Martin to Wheelwright. Daniels was not certain, he said, how many times he struck Collins, and was vague about other circumstances. Collins had been struck on the head 6 times. Circuit Judge Edward P. Hill pronounced sentence on him this week. Doing a little research, I found a death certificate for Graydon Daniels, who was convicted by a jury in Pike County of murdering Dan Collins. But I found a death certificate that was dated April the 11th, 1960. That was 11 years after he was sentenced. So obviously he didn't fulfill all his sentence. I don't know what happened there. But it's from the West Virginia Department of Health, Vital Statistics. Place of death, Wyoming County, West Virginia, Baileysville, and it says place of death inside city limits, no. Residence on a farm, no. Male, white, married, date of birth, January the 7th, 1927, age 33, 3 months and 4 days. Occupation is listed as a miner, and it says coal with the question mark. Birthplace, Drift, Kentucky, USA. Father's name, John Daniel. Mother's name, Vernie Fitch. Informant, Edith Hall Daniels. Was ever in the armed forces? It says yes. Cause of death, drowning. Bruise on forehead, not serious. Car which he was driving plunged into Gyndaut River in West Virginia. He was pinned inside. And it says Baileysville to Hanover Road. Baileysville, West Virginia. And it says burial. The date of burial, 4/14/60. Name of cemetery, Lucy Hall Cemetery at McDowell, Kentucky.